Welcome to SETA DC4 panel and the keynote by Fuat Oktay on the issue of current state of Syrian refugees in Turkey. And we are honored today to have Mr. Oktay. When we were in Turkey, actually, we communicated with him and we told him about the report that we are writing. And although he was really busy, he accepted to come to the luncheon of our report. And we want to thank him for giving us this opportunity and giving most of the people in Washington, D.C., those interested in Syrian refugees, the opportunity to come and speak about the current state of Syrian refugees and AFAD activities in Turkey. Mr. Oktay told me a couple days ago that he doesn't like long introductions, but just I prepared actually a brief one so that he will not be annoyed and you would have an idea about Mr. Oktay. Mr. Oktay is the president of AFAD. He completed his bachelor's degree in Turkey on business management, then received MBA and PhD at Wayne State University, and an MBA program on manufacturing engineering. He worked in companies like Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler while he was in the United States. He lectured in universities. Then in Turkey, Mr. Oktay served as the Deputy Director or General responsible for strategic planning and business development, sales and marketing, production planning, and information technologies at Turkish Airlines. Then he was appointed as the President of AFAD, and since then he is serving as the President of AFAD and doing an impressive work in this institution. Please welcome Mr. Oktay for his keynote speech.
Thank you very much again for the brief introduction. It's great to be here with you, Washington and SETA Washington office. Again, it's great to be part of the launching of a report that has been prepared regarding the activities that as AFAD we have been conducting in Turkey regarding Syrians indeed. Let me just start by just giving a very brief information about what AFAD is all about. It's the Turkish Disaster and Emergency Management Authority in Turkey, kind of like FEMA and part of USAID-like organization in Turkey, indeed, responsible from mainly from the natural disasters and any emergency issues, including earthquakes and flooding as well, and also responsible from man-made disasters like Syrian and Iraqi issues and many others around the world, and also responsible from technology-based disasters like any type of accidents, nuclear or chemicals or threats as well, or biological, radioactive, and cyber as well. Working heavily on developing systems indeed. We have already completed an integrated response system in Turkey. Basically, what it does is brings all the capacities and capabilities of every single public institution and private institutions as well, of course, including NGOs, at the central and local level indeed, tool that integrates all those capacities and capabilities into the management of disasters. Also developing a system on the mitigation part as well, the risk management part. What we are trying to do basically is creating a resilient society. With the latest Sendai framework, now it has basically further to another step, kind of like building back better. Through that system, what we do is basically developing integrated hazard maps throughout the entire country at the province level, and then have already developed a sophisticated model indeed for the risk assessment and also risk prioritization. Then basically we'll be concentrating on developing projects and implementing those projects to mitigate or reduce those risks. Of course, mindset is important. We have launched a huge project on somehow changing the mindset in Turkey towards managing or fighting against disasters or emergency cases, in kind of like more from crisis management towards risk management side. So this is basically what we do as AFAD in Turkey, but all the capacity and the capability that we develop is not just for Turkey, of course. It is for the entire region and for the entire world. This is true for any organization, any AFAD-like organization, indeed. Whatever the capacity that you develop is the capacity for the entire world for managing the disasters. As far as the Syrian issue, since the number of refugees coming to Turkey, either from Syrian side or Iraqi side, have basically increased so much that for a single institution in Turkey, which is mainly responsible for managing the refugee case, for them it was almost impossible to manage this event. So we did basically acknowledge it as a disaster or an emergency case, and it was turned over to AFAD to manage the whole Syrian refugee issue, and now the Iraqi refugee issue as well. So indeed, we did start from the beginning. We did start getting involved into the issue. So the Syrian issue was started in April 2011 with nearly 250 people, like 241, I guess, in the exact numbers. From Hatay, I don't know whether you know Turkey or not, but Hatay is a southeastern, one of our southeastern cities at the border, near to Syria, indeed. Then it started increasing. Of course, we just hosted them in a single, very small camp in Hatay. Then the numbers started increasing. Then built the second one, and then the third one. Daryl just, I think, has come from Turkey. She was in Antep, I guess, right? But you must know Hatay as well. Then built the third one, fourth one, fifth one, sixth one, and then almost the whole city was full of refugees. So we realized that the problem is going to continue, and we realized that it's going to be somehow longer than we did expect at the beginning. So just based upon the lessons learned, what we did, just moved to the next city called Kilic, and developed our standards, kind of like camp building establishment standards, and also the running standards as well. And then built a new camp over there, and we did not call it a camp, and we still don't call them camps either. But let me call it camp over there for the sake of easy communication, better communication. So the system we developed over there is still the system that we run indeed, but it's an improved state at this point. What we have is almost all the infrastructure and all the things that you might find in any city that you might visit. You'll find the educational campuses, you'll find the healthcare campuses, you'll find the logistics campuses, and all types of social activities, sports activities, and training activities, kind of like vocational ones, and etc. Almost 76,000 students right now. All the kids at those camps attend school. We do have 76,000 and more than 3,000 teachers in those camps. As of today, we have 25 different camps throughout the nearby cities. In 10 cities, indeed, we do have 25 camps right now. We run 25 camps. We do have preschool activities, of course, and all the 12th grades, and then, of course, the ones who graduate from those schools do have opportunity to attend universities as well. We have more than 4,000 college students as well. So the main goal was, and still is, not to let a lost generation, not to have a lost Syrian generation indeed. We did really work hard on that one, and we still do work very hard on that issue. We do have vocational training as well for those adults. Right now, there are more than 240, nearly 240 vocational training courses including language classes like English, Turkish, Arabic, and computer classes, and like math type of classes, and also skill-based trainings as well. For the healthcare part, we have provided healthcare to all free of charge in every single one of those camps indeed. As a Turkish citizen, we have to pay certain amount of it, certain percentage of the total cost, but the Syrians and Iraqis don't have to. We do provide healthcare free of charge to all Syrians and Iraqis for urban refugees as well, those non-camp refugees. Of course, there are psychological support programs as well, and programs for kids, especially those orphans. We do provide specific services and special care to orphans as well. We have councils, or like clubs, indeed, women's clubs or councils, let me say, and youth councils, kids councils, elderly councils. By councils, I mean people, the community themselves, they elect their own representatives, form a council, and then that council is responsible from developing their own program by their potential program, for their members. They do develop programs, whether it's training or social programs, depending upon the demand. We do have a special management system as well in those camps. Every single community elects their own representative, and that representative represents their own community at the camp management. So the person who comes into the camp is not the same person when he or she leaves, because he or she is able to speak up on their own. It's a kind of like letting them taste some type of like some level of democracy over there, what it means to stand up on their own, especially those people coming from a dictatorship and coming and running away from the war. So usually the general, in general, let me say, the standards and the quality and level of services are a lot better comparing to the rest of the world and to the UN standards, especially a lot above and beyond the UN standards, and getting criticism from UN as well for this reason. They claim that they are having a hard time throughout the entire world because they are not able to match our standards anymore. So it's nice to get such feedback, but it's not easy to have such a high level service and quality, keeping it sustainable indeed. I'll just talk about why it's not that easy. But for the non-camp refugees, the life and the conditions are not as easy and as good as, as easy and as comfortable as the ones who live in the camps. Yes, we do provide healthcare to all, no problem from that point. But providing healthcare with the same capacity, especially for the local community, creates a bottleneck for the healthcare services. Like think about Kilic. Kilic, the population it's a city again, the population is nearly 92,000. The number of refugees, Syrian refugees in the city is more than 100,000. So it means that we have doubled the population of the city, so we cannot provide the same level of healthcare services to the local community by keeping the capacity the same. So the capacity itself becomes a bottleneck. So this is one part that we basically call on the international community to become part of it, to increase the capacity, the healthcare capacity at the local level, at the border cities basically. As far as the education again is concerned, our motto was and still is that we have to reach those kids before anyone else does, and we are not going to let those kids to the streets, and basically we are not going to let a lost generation happen. We do have another additional more than 100,000 indeed kids attending school, basically through NGOs and likewise indeed, and another nearly 30,000 kids attending the Turkish state schools. In total, what we have is around 200,000 kids attending school. So if you look at it from one perspective, sounds great. But if you realize that, if you think that 30 to 35% of the entire population is school-age kids, then indeed this reflects just 1/3 of the school-age kids. So this means that we are able to reach only 1/3 of the kids so far. We are able to bring only 1/3 of the kids to the school. So there are 2/3 still waiting for us to reach them. Again, we have somehow outcried to the international society, including UN as well, and UNICEF as well. Yes, we did get help to some extent, but getting help for 1,000 kids or 3,000 or 5,000 kids does not mean help in this case. Having 600,000, at least 600,000 kids out there waiting for us to reach them, just building 5 or 10 schools with 10,000 capacity doesn't mean that we have done our job as the international society. So that does not that should not basically ease us that we have done our job. So unfortunately, we were not able to let the international society hear our words, including UN. Then we basically came back to our own resources. Started working with the Ministry of Education for the last 1.5 years. We developed a system, and now the system is up and running. It's a kind of like a database, and like an e-schooling system. We have biometrically registered every single Syrian and Iraqi as well. Right now, we do have nearly 1.8 biometrically registered Syrian in Turkey. In total, we think that it's merely 2 million with the Iraqis. So we know now where every single one of those kids are, where they live, with whom, and how we can reach them. The challenge right now is, again, to have physical locations for us to provide them training or educational activities. We are not able to integrate them with the Turkish state schools because of the language barrier. It's Turkish for Turkey, and these kids basically, the native language is Arabic. Based upon the recent survey that we have conducted, because we conduct regular surveys indeed to measure the level of our services and the satisfaction level, and also the needs, for the needs analysis as well. From one part, with the biometric registration, we do have almost 100% needs analysis over there. How many kids and how many of those need schooling, or how many sick and injured people, and where they live, and what type of healthcare services are needed, and financial needs as well. But we still conduct those surveys to get more from the field indeed. So that shows that the recent survey we have conducted shows that almost more than 95% of those who live in the camps would like to learn Turkish, and more than almost 98% of those who live in the non-camp areas would like to learn Turkish. So it's a huge demand, and we are not able to basically respond to all either. So we have been trying to involve different organizations to help us indeed. That might be a sign for those refugees also that this issue is going to last long, and nobody knows how long it's going to be. So they are looking to find some ways to adapt themselves to the society. So we as AFAD have also started programs and training programs to basically provide to both communities, to Turkish communities and the Syrian communities as well regarding creates some kind of cultural awareness toward each other so that they can understand each other better. So this is another program that we provide. But again, for the educational part, yes, we have developed a e-schooling type of program for these kids, and our aim is to reach every single one of those. But still, here I would like to raise, and through you, basically, I'd like to raise our voice once more that international community has to become part of this issue. As far as the needs, again, in Turkey for the Syrian community, yes, healthcare is one part. Educational facilities is another. But sheltering and food and non-food in-kind items is an issue for the urban refugees as well. We did have developed another system for it indeed, and looking for donors international as well. Yes, there are NGOs, local and international ones, trying to help those. But we said maybe providing a kind of like, the system is, we have registered and we distribute an ID card for every single individual. So we know who the family is and who the leader of the family. So we would like to distribute cards and load certain credit into those cards and basically let those people spend based upon their own need rather than us providing them food or non-food items. Let them decide what they need and when they need it. There are, of course, some activities that we conduct, especially for the cross-border activities as well, humanitarian aid side. There are more than 100 camps just in the nearby cities to Turkey, just at the other side of the border. There are more than 200,000 people living in those 100 camps at the Syrian side. We try our best to provide humanitarian assistance to those, to promote them not to come to Turkish side, just to let them stay in their own countries and let them provide as much as we can. So we did develop a system we call it the 0 point humanitarian aid system through Red Crescent. Basically, we just promote and urge all the NGOs and all the organizations to donate to Red Crescent, and through Red Crescent, whoever needs it might come in and basically receive those aid. But we try to make sure that every single aid, in-kind aid, directly goes to those people who really need it. We make sure that that does not go to the militants at the field. So we have provided almost like more than $400 million through NGOs, indeed, value of humanitarian aid as well. The cost in total is nearly 5.6 billion, 5.7 billion right now indeed, dollars. We are into the 5th year of it. International aid assistance within this total is just $306 million in total for 4.5 years. 217 million of this 306 belongs to UN. Through all the UN agencies, including WFP, UNICEF, UNHCR, all contribute 217 million of it. Comparing to $5.7 billion, it's almost nothing. Yes, Turkey is trying its best. Yes, Turkey has had an open door policy from day one, from day zero even. Yes, today we still do have an open door policy and we try our best to provide all, but for us to provide a sustainable service for us to provide that open door policy, the international community, especially the developed and developing countries, have to take part in this case. The problem is, as far as the expectations are concerned, the awareness. We have to have some type of awareness of it. Yes, many things are going on around the world, and all of a sudden the whole thing becomes a statistic for most of us. The whole thing becomes kind of like an entertainment issue for most of the world. By entertainment, I do mean that just look at the TV and get the news, right? Like a drama. You might cry, we might cry, but we cry when we go to the movies as well, right? But once we leave the movies, once we get into our normal programs, it's all over for us. So this has somehow started turning into such a case indeed. Yes, we do cry, and yes, it affects us, but once we get into our daily programs, we just start forgetting about it, and it becomes a statistic for the whole world. So it is not a statistic for Turkey. It's a reality, and we do live with it day by day, especially those local communities. They do live with it day by day. What do we hear from the international community? Checking whether Turkey still have an open door policy or not. Checking whether we do provide high-level quality services or not. Checking to see whether we have closed one of our doors or not. Indeed, the question is, Turkey is trying its best. The question is not checking on what Turkey is doing, but checking on themselves, what they are doing versus what they are supposed to do. Creating awareness is important for sustainable services. But the main thing is that international burden sharing has to happen. Of course, as I said, it totally depends on the awareness, increased level of awareness. And you over here, this report is important from that point of view. As the head of AFAD, me telling you about those services that we provide does not mean much. I'm just, what else can the head of an organization who provides services to Syrians can tell you, right? Of course, I'll be telling you what we have done and how perfect services that we provide and blah, blah, blah. And you might think that I'm just telling you how perfect organization we are. But providing the same information independently from a critical point of view will mean a lot. So it should be you indeed who are in this room should be raising our voice rather than us, rather than the head of an organization who provides these services. So that's why this report means a lot to us, especially here at the US. Yes, on one side there's a long way geographically, but indeed in today's world, long geographical location does not mean much. And the world is too small, global, and a very small village. So open door policy is important in this global world. To have an open door policy, you don't have to have a physical border near to Syria or near to any other country in the world who is suffering from humanitarian or from wars or whatever the disaster that's going on, man-made or other types of disasters. Rather than just expecting Turkey to have open door policy, just a couple of more minutes, I'll just rather than just looking into Turkey to have open door policy, what we would like to see is to have the developed and developing countries to have the open door policy for those Syrians and Iraqis who would need humanitarian aid. We have been hearing and watching those news, especially during the last week or so. 400 people, 700 people, and now we have even forgot about the figures. I strongly believe that none of us, if I ask one by one, including myself, most probably we are not going to able to give a single number in terms of how many have died in Mediterranean. The people who are trying to run away from the war zone over there. So that's why I meant it becomes a statistics for most of us, and it becomes a kind of like drama for most of us. But it's not drama for those who run away and who basically die in the middle of the sea over there. So the other countries has to have an open door policy for all. As the head of AFAD, I promise that I will take the responsibility to bring those refugees to the border, physical border of those countries who will have open door policy. Doesn't have to have physical border. So of course, the main issue still lies at the political solution. No matter what we do, no matter how perfect job we try to provide, it is still a means to ease their suffering. That's not a means to solve the problem. The main goal should be resolving the main conflict over there that's going on in Syria for 5 years. Nobody knows how long it's going to take. And those refugees in Turkey, they have no idea how long it's going to take, whether they'll be able to get back to their countries or not. So the whole thing lies at the political solution. So again, it is important for this room, for all of you who are here at this room, and also for the organization itself, to basically send this message out that the main issue is finding a political solution. So yes, we will try our best till that day, but the humanitarian assistance is not the solution to end this problem. Basically, this is the general picture that for the Syrians in Turkey. But we do provide exactly the similar services and have similar issues for the Iraqis in Turkey as well. Just for a couple of words, and I'll stop. Within a couple of days, we have received more than 200,000, like 194,000, that's the net figure, from Kobani. I personally was there. Most of you know Kobani, that's why I just wanted to mention about it. I was personally there. Forget about being the head of an organization who's responsible for providing humanitarian assistance. I was there individually. Those, remember, just try to imagine those videos, the things that we have watched through the cameras or TV. I was there. We have received every single almost civilian that used to live over there. Almost all. And then guess what? We were blamed that Turkey was not helping and Turkey was not doing what it was supposed to do. And as the person who was there basically, day and night, I was trying to tell people that we were helping people. It's a dilemma. Yes, at one place you try your best to provide humanitarian aid, and the other side you try to fight against a perception war. Same thing goes for Yazidis. For the Iraqi side, when the ISIS issue is raised, when all those fighting did start, the Yazidis in Iraq and the ones who fled to Turkey, again, Turkey was the only country, like the Kurds in Kobani, we were the only country who was helping them. We did establish 2 or 3 camps in Iraq. 22,000 Yazidis live in Iraq, just near to Duhok, to Shariat, like 17 kilometers, like nearly 10 miles southern part of Duhok in Iraq, and Zaho, nearby city to Turkey, Iraqi city. We have built camps for Yazidis and for Kurds and Arabs and Turkmen who are suffering from the conflict there, and we have hosted them. We are still hosting those people there, and did establish camps in Turkey, provided help for Yazidis and others, provided help for Christians, provided help for, like, just because of the issue that's been on the agenda, like Armenians, there are Armenians in Syria. We do provide help. If anybody is in trouble in those areas, they know that when they come to Turkey or when they ask help from Turkey, they know that they are going to get it. No matter what their religion is, no matter what their ethnicity is, and no matter what their sex or whatever it is. When we look at the person, we see an individual who needs humanitarian assistance. We don't see his or her religion or ethnicity or geography, whatever it is. So as Turkey, we try our best. We will still try our best, not only in Iraq and Syria, but we do provide help throughout the entire world, almost like we have been as AFAD active in more than 50 countries all over the world. So I will love to hear from you indeed. We'll be hearing through the panel as well, panel discussion, that this community should get larger and larger indeed to raise our world. The solution is not at the humanitarian assistance. The solution is resolving the conflicts and not letting those people suffer from the wars or conflicts that's going on in Syria or Iraq or anywhere else in the world. No matter what the problems are in those areas, the Assad problem still is there, and the main cause of the problem is there. And many terrorist organizations are all around the world. Of course, security is still an issue for us. We try our best, and again, I love to hear from you to raise our voices as well. Thank you very much, and I hope that you are going to have a wonderful and fruitful discussion.
We can have a few questions before the panel. If you have any questions, please raise your hand and identify yourself. Yes.
How are you, sir? Good discourse. One question I have. If there's an international effort, a military effort, to depose Assad in Syria as a means to ending this humanitarian crisis, do you think Turkey would support such a venture, sir?
Well, I think as the head of a humanitarian assistance organization, if I answer this question, this is not going to be suitable. So this is a good question for the Minister of Foreign Affairs to answer.
Your opinion will be fine, sir. Your opinion will be fine.
I'll talk to you personally. Thank you.
Yeah, Ken Meyerberg, World If we go back,
Ken Meyerberg, World. If we go back to the very beginning of the revolt in Syria, I heard a Lebanese nun saying once that Turkey was building refugee camps before there were any refugees.
Before?
In other words, like they knew what was coming.
Before there were any other refugees.
Not really. The first refugee camp we had was for those 241 people who came to Turkey through Hatay. And we just hosted them in very small sites over there. So Daryl might have seen, I don't know, if you visited Hatay. I wish we knew, but no. We did not know about it.
Yes, right back.
Sarah Bryn Hudgens, Georgetown University. Can you tell us about the process for Syrian refugees in Turkey to get residency?
Sure. We don't have any process going on to provide residency for Syrians or Iraqis at this point in Turkey. But what we have is to provide work permit. There's a process going on to provide work permit for them. The Ministry of Labor is working for it, and they are almost at the end of the process. Hopefully within a very short time, it's going to be clear who are going to get the work permit and to basically what percent. We do have a challenge over there. At one side we have nearly 2 million refugees who are asking for work permit, and at the other side we do have local community who are concerned about losing their own job. So for us, seeing and realizing that this is not a short-term problem, we have to be hearing the voices of those local communities and find a balanced solution. So I think the solution, the work permit issue, is going to be a balanced one, and maybe is going to be a kind of like stepwise approach over there. And basically the other one is, as I mentioned, is a kind of like providing adaptability program through cultural awareness issues.
Yeah. Barbara Slavin from the Atlantic Council and elmonitor.com. You say you want more help. Is it just financial help that you're looking for from the international community? Are you looking for bilateral assistance from the United States? Just money or in kind, or people actually coming and taking some of these refugees off your hands in terms of permanent resettlement? Thanks.
The thing that we look for is, as I said, creating awareness, sharing the burden through, yes, bilateral assistance as well, and also sharing the burden not only financially, but through creating that awareness as well in terms of what those Syrians are suffering from, and Iraqis as well, and what Turkey is doing and how. And also having an open door policy and getting involved with the resettlement issues, and of course trying to raise again the need for political solution, to press more on UN, and the countries, especially the ones at the council, UN Council. Yes, we would like to get directly bilateral assistance, because one of the things that we do in Turkey is whatever the donation is directly goes to the field. If it is 10 unit directly goes to the field, not 99 and $99.99. $100 directly goes to the field. We do have a very transparent system that directly, basically, the donors can report it back to their, or the agencies, organizations can report it back to their donors.
Do you get any bilateral assistance from the U.S., or it only goes to the
Not
UN?
really, no. No, we have not got any so far. I know that US is trying sending it through UN, but as I said, the whole amount coming from UN for almost 4.5 years since the beginning of the crisis is 217 million. That includes all the countries and organizations sending their help through UN. We did develop a system on that part as well that has kind of like the IT infrastructure of this. Well, what we have is the biometric registration. There's a needs analysis going on there. That's a demand, we call, and we have created a supplier part for the donors. We do provide user ID and passports for those who would like to get enrolled into that program. Will be able to see online what is needed there and can contribute directly to where they want to contribute, and they can still handle like a classic way of NGO activity. Thank you.
If panel won't mind, I will get 2 more questions and 1, 2.
Joe Livingston from the State Department's Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration. First, I want to say thank you so much, Mr. Oktay, Dr. Oktay, for the incredible generosity of Turkey. We are all, we, the United States, the international community, are extraordinarily grateful for the support, for the generosity, which we know comes both from the government, but also from the people's hearts of Turks who hosted them in their communities and as friends. Just a point on the U.S. support. We've provided now in Turkey $259 million in support. A lot of that, the majority of it has gone through the UN. So when we're looking at the UN support that you noted as 217 million, the vast majority of that has actually come from U.S. donations. We represent the vast majority of support to UNHCR, to UNICEF, to UNFPA, World Food Program, all of the UN organizations that are contributing. But this is part of a larger $3.7 billion that the U.S. has provided in humanitarian support regionally. And Turkey may be the smaller part of that, but huge portions of that assistance have gone into Syria directly, particularly in the north, where we see the support that we're providing in IDP camps and to those with acute needs as part of helping the burden in Turkey as well. I would just also like to say that we share your concerns, particularly in the area of education, which is why we've given so much to UNICEF. Through our support directly, we've supported over 20 schools in Syria, and right now we're evaluating a host of new potential projects, both through UNICEF and through NGOs, to support direct formal education, both through and outside the Turkish formal system, and as well Turkish translation, because we know that this is one of the main barriers. So I just want to say thank you again for all of the work that Turkey does, and to let you know that we are here to help. We see ourselves as partners with you and part of the solution, and we look forward to more continued cooperation.
Thank you again. But again, just I would like to repeat once more that the total amount that has been that we have received through UN is $217 million. We do have a very, very concrete and reliable recording system. What we do basically, rather than taking the source country's amount, we basically record the amount that we receive, which directly goes to the field. So the total amount is 217 million so far that we have received from all UN organizations so far for since the beginning of the crisis. Thank you.
Thanks for your presentation. Nel Gabiam, Georgetown University. I was told, I don't know if this is correct or not, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I was told with regard to Palestinians who've crossed from Syria into Turkey that they're not accepted into the refugee camps that are set up for Syrians. And so I was wondering if you could address that, but also more generally, what kinds of assistance is available for Palestinians who have fled Syria and are now in Turkey?
Indeed, this was an issue brought to my attention as well when I was in Turkey. But we don't have any question even that's asked to those refugees who come to the camps in terms of where they are coming from and who they are in terms of originally ethnicity based. So I don't think this should be the case. Yes, we are careful that we should not turn Turkey into attracting refugees from other regions as well, just because we provide better services. But for the ones who are coming from Syria and the Iraqi side, we don't ask who their ethnicities are. So there must be something wrong with the information. Because I did check on that one, not once, several times. And I did talk to, and I did discuss the issue with the ambassador, Palestinian ambassador in Turkey as well. So I know the issue very well.
So normally they would have access to the same
Sure.
assistance as
They do have totally the same access, given that they are the ones coming from the Syrian side or Iraqi side, not coming from Lebanon or other places.
We will get one last question.
Charles Martin, I've taught for Open Society Institute at Bilgi University, and I taught at the summer program here of Bahçeşehir University. Last week there was an article in the Washington Post about the president of Bahçeşehir University contributing $10 million of his own to a proposed higher education system for refugees in Turkey, and of course calling for help for that. Do you know anything more about that proposal by the Bahçeşehir president? And if you do, what do you think about it?
I am not aware of that 10 million you said, right?
Of his own money.
Right. I am not aware of it. That must be, if it is there, it has to be within our recordings, basically. I'll look into that when I get back.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now I think we can have our panelists, Daryl, Kadir, and Kemal Kirisci joining us. Welcome again for this time the panel on current state of Syrian refugees. We have three distinguished speakers today. Kemal. Joining us today to discuss the issue of current state of Syrian refugees in Turkey, and if Fuat Bey wants to make some remarks at the end, he is more than welcome to do that. After the discussion, the first speaker will be Daryl Grisgraber, the senior advocate at Refugees International, and Kemal Kirisci is joining us. He is the TÜSIAD Senior Fellow and Director of the Center on United States and Europe's Turkey Project at Brookings Institution. And the last speaker will be Kadir Ustun. He is the newly appointed Executive Director at the SETA Foundation in Washington, D.C. So we will start, since we don't have much time, we will start with Daryl.
Okay, I'll try to be brief.
Sure.
Do I need to do anything with this?
Oh,
Yeah.
It's on.
Can everyone hear me?
on?
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, thanks for having me. Thank you, Dr. Oktay, for your comments. You know, I thought I had planned out rather carefully what I wanted to talk about this morning, but I feel the need to respond to some of the things you said, not in the sense that I take issue with any of them, but to maybe highlight the urgency of some of the issues that were brought up in what Dr. Oktay was saying. To start, I cover the Middle East for Refugees International. For the past few years, that has meant all Syria all the time, and the Syria crisis writ large. So I go back and forth to all of the hosting countries, and I go inside Syria when it's safe enough. And I've been doing this for several years, and Turkey is, without question, sort of the place to be if you're a Syrian refugee. The Syrians themselves tell us that everybody wants to be in Turkey. It's not just the five-star camps, which I have seen, and they are, in fact, the best camps I've seen in my entire career. I make no mistake about that. But even the people who are not in the camps, who are having arguably a much more difficult time with the situation, say that Turkey is a better place to be. They feel safer there. They feel more integrated into their communities. And they feel like Turkey is making more of a genuine effort to do something for them. This is really important because, you know, Turkey has also been one of the first countries to acknowledge that the Syrians are probably going to be here for quite some time. I mean, I don't think anyone is sort of trying to guess at how long that's going to be, but it's going to be a while because Syria itself is very far behind in development nowadays. And, you know, when countries are sort of nervous about admitting that, it also makes it harder for them to provide good services. So it's important that Turkey has acknowledged this and that they're thinking in terms of integration and what comes in the future for the Syrians. This is not to say they're all going to stay there, but it is to say what can we do for their well-being while they're here right now. And so I was really pleased in particular that Dr. Oktay talked about education. My last mission, just a couple of weeks ago, was very much about birth registration for the Syrian refugees in Turkey. And it's a very narrow issue, and I won't bore you with all of those details. But the bottom line is, if kids can't get registered, prove that they exist, prove they have an identity, they can't get access to any services as children of refugees and refugees themselves. There is a registration system that we have watched improve over the years in Turkey. As I said, I've been going there for several years, and there was a time when people outside of the camps couldn't register at all. And it took some time, and it does take time to build processes. This is how it works. But people are being registered outside of the camps now. And they have what's called temporary protected status. They can register their children for that as well. And it's not a perfect system. No humanitarian response is perfect. I've seen plenty of them. But it is possible for this to happen now in Turkey. What that means once children are registered for temporary protected status is that they have access to the educational system as well as healthcare. It's not only about education. But we are quite focused on this because, as Dr. Oktay said, there's a whole generation of kids that we don't want to lose. At this point, there are children who have been out of school for 4 years during the course of the entire Syrian conflict. There are children being born in all the countries of refuge who either are not old enough for school yet or may well not be able to go once they are old enough. So we're talking about, roughly a decade here of school being missed one way or another for a lot of these kids. And the most important thing about this is that these kids are the future of Syria. Syrians themselves are hanging on to the hope that they are going back someday. And I'm sure we all hope for them that that is true as well. They want to go back, they want to rebuild Syria. And these children are the ones who are going to be doing that. And it's really important that we're paying attention to them, giving them an education, and giving them opportunities. So the Turkish government's efforts to really start pulling them into the education system has been very important and is going to be one of the most forward-looking activities that's happening here in Turkey. In addition to that, I wanted to add a little bit about the non-camp refugees specifically in Turkey, because while the camps are great, make no mistake, there are struggles for the refugees who are not in them. We've seen people who don't have housing or who live 4 or 5 families to a 2-room apartment. We have seen people who don't have enough to eat and live on the street. We have seen people who can't get the kids to school. All of these situations exist in every refugee situation there is, but Turkey is really making a good faith effort to change these things and say what they can do. And as we've heard, there has not been a lot of support from the rest of the world. Now, I look at this as sort of a good and a bad thing. Good, not good, but a positive thing in the sense that Turkey was doing such a great job with the response on its own that the whole rest of the world was able to say, terrific, like they're taking care of this on their own. We don't need to help. I mean, they were doing a great job. Turkey provides humanitarian aid all over the world. They are no strangers to hosting refugees and doing humanitarian response. So in that sense, I think it really speaks to the quality of work that the government was able to do. On the other hand, it made the rest of the world step back and say, we think you've got this, and we'll focus our resources elsewhere. And that's been going on for about 4 years now, and the fact is that after spending $5.5 billion, it's completely reasonable to be asking for some help. So that's something we all need to be thinking about. How are we supporting not just Turkey, but all of the host countries in being able to keep their borders open, being able to provide for the refugees, and being able to look forward to the future and what will happen with them. Some of the current challenges that still exist as well is there are some border restrictions in Turkey. There's a new law out that has to do with foreigners and citizenship. And one of the tricky things about this is humanitarian aid will continue to flow across the border. Humanitarian workers will continue to come back and forth. But Syrians themselves who need to get out, or people who go back and forth, for example, medical workers who are inside Syria, it's going to be much harder for them to get across the border and then get back into Syria. So we spoke to a lot of Syrians while we were there, many of whom are doctors and health professionals, who say, well, I stay there for a month at a time, and then I need to leave for a week to go to Turkey for R&R, to see my family, to get away from the bombs for a little while. I don't think anyone can argue that that's a great idea, right? It's going to be a bit more difficult for them to do that. So that's something we need to think about as we're looking at the border restrictions that are there. I also think one of the most important things to keep in mind is the political solution that Dr. Oktay mentioned. I'm a humanitarian. I believe in humanitarian aid, and even I will tell you clearly, humanitarian aid is a Band-Aid. We can keep throwing stuff and services and help at people, but the fact is, if they're still fleeing and they still need all of this assistance, the problem is not solved. So it's really not possible to overstate how important that political solution is. And humanitarians, of course, are not responsible for making that happen, but we need to keep in mind that that is the base of everything that is going on. In addition, the zero-point distribution that's been happening from Turkey has been extremely important to getting aid inside of Syria and saving a lot of lives. So we need to keep that in mind as a resource that Turkey's also been offering and figure out how we might increase that as well and bolster it. I'm going to leave it there because I know we're a little short on time, but I'm happy to answer questions afterwards, and thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Daryl. Kemal hocam?
Well, thanks, Kilic, and thanks, Başkanım. Daryl, I'd like to thank you too, because in your presentation it came across in a very conspicuous and clear manner when someone from the field speaks with the awareness of the challenges out there, some of the challenges that Fuat also brought up. One reason why I'm highlighting this is that at Brookings we did run a project on Syrian displacement, but we published our last report in May last year. So there is a tiny bit of a gap out there over which I need to warn you as I reflect on 4 or 5 very broad observations I'd like to make. One observation that I'd like to underline quite forcefully, is that the world is recognizing what Turkey is doing and how Turkey is leading the humanitarian and protection effort. Maybe the challenge there is that that awareness is limited to people who have experience in this area, and that awareness needs to be extended beyond that community, though I think slowly and surely it is happening, and it's happening because there are very credible NGO experts and activists, but also governments are doing it. I hear it from EU officials, I hear it from US officials as well. However, right on the heels of this observation, I have to highlight a rather depressing picture. And to capture that depressing picture, you just need to look at the Washington Post of this morning. There are 2-3 stories about what's happening across the Mediterranean. The Washington Post's own op-ed highlights there are 500,000 million people waiting in Libya to get across. That's a major issue on the agenda of the European Union. But even more depressing in today's Washington Post, I don't want to turn a beautiful day out there like today into a gray, grim one, but Henry Barkey, a good friend and colleague from Lehigh University, has an op-ed called "The End of the Middle East State." I noticed both Fuat Bey as well as Daryl, who kept referring to Syria and Syrians. Henry Barkey in his article is highlighting that the Middle East with which we're going to learn to live will not look like the Middle East we have been accustomed to work with or to learn about. Often people refer to the Sykes-Picot Middle East, the Middle East delineated by borders. The borders will probably remain there on paper and as far as the UN goes, but politically there is going to be a very different picture out there. When we did our project and we published our final report, we put heavy accent on the importance and challenge of integrating Syrians into Turkish society, and both AFAD and the government and local government in Turkey too have been making an effort in that direction. I think our next challenge, it's a frightening challenge, is to recognize the picture that Henry Barkey has drawn out there and draw lessons from it. And I fear, Fuat Başkanım, your job will continue to be as challenging as it has been so far, if not even more. I'm really beginning to get depressed myself personally, because the following point I'm going to make does not bear that great news. A good friend and colleague of mine with whom we ran the project I made references to, just about a week ago on the Brookings web page published an op-ed on how the failure of the international humanitarian system. I won't go into the details of the op-ed, but I would like to invite you to have a quick look at it if it is of interest to you. The failure is partly out as a function of the realities out there. We must not forget that it's not just Syria, it's not just Turkey, it's also Lebanon, it's Jordan, it's Iraq. We don't talk about what's happening in Ukraine. In Ukraine, there's a very serious displacement challenge out there as well. Africa, why are people trying to cross the Mediterranean the way they do at such high human cost? Africa, on the one hand, is offering a lot of promises, but on the other hand, there are these humanitarian challenges out there. And interestingly, Fuat Başkanım, Beth Ferris highlights the importance of regional organizations, that more and more regional organizations have to take on the burden. But the Middle East lacks those regional organizations, though one organization that Beth Ferris in her op-ed highlights is the Islamic Conference Organization. However, I'm not very familiar with the details of how far they are involved in tackling the humanitarian challenges that face the region, the Middle East in this particular case. A third point, or it's the fourth one that I'd like to make, is this puzzlement that I have. And it's a puzzlement that I've been facing since Beth Ferris dragged me back to these refugee issues right at a point after having worked on these things for almost 33 decades. I was about to hang up my boots, so to say. There's something that's not right between Turkey and the international community with respect to burden sharing. There's a chemistry that's not right there, and I don't want to blame one or the other side, but I feel that this phenomenon needs to be addressed, needs to be studied, it needs to be understood, and some remedy needs to be suggested. There is a lot that the Syrians, that Turkey and the region would benefit from a new chemistry, maybe a new discourse, and maybe both sides, meaning the international community, and in there the European Union, the United States, and other important players, and Turkey need to look at themselves. I appreciated the point made by our State Department colleague here that the United States and the European Union are contributing. You know, when you go and look at their websites, the amount of money they declare that they have channeled into humanitarian assistance and providing protection is an important sum. But I don't know what's happening. That this problem needs to be addressed. Is it getting lost along the line, or isn't enough benefit being extracted from the resources that are flowing into it? Is it that there is not good enough cooperation and collaboration between the parties? I can't resolve it, but it remains as a puzzlement for me that I think would be good to address. My final point is that last year, having highlighted the challenge of integration more and more, and with Beth Ferris will be going back in June to write one final report. We keep saying that this will be the final report, but as the crisis doesn't go away, we seem to keep returning back to the topic, security priorities. I'd like to go back to Henry Barkey's op-ed there. As states, as we have known them, are dissolving, the chaos that is emerging from the Middle East is with itself bringing security challenges of the kind the international community had not experienced before. And this applies for Turkey too. every morning I personally get up worrying about news that might come from Turkey that challenges Turkey's national security by the kinds of groups that I need not mention here. I was really relieved by the emphasis that Fuat Bey and also Daryl put on the education of the youth. I think today we are very aware that education is critical with respect to meeting the security challenges that the international community faces, emanating one way or the other from the Middle East. But I have a feeling that there is more there than just education. But maybe this reality might be a way of mobilizing the international community to address this issue of education there. I'd like to end by linking this point and say that I do share Fuat and Daryl's emphasis on the fact that the real solution to this humanitarian challenge is finding a political solution. But that political solution, we have to recognize, is not around the corner. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Kemal. Kadir.
Thank you again for Dr. Oktay and Professor Kirisci and Daryl for being here, joining us to discuss this issue. It's been a while we became interested in discussing to write a report on the refugee issue in Turkey, not because we have expertise on refugees, Kilic and I, or we have expertise on humanitarian issues, but it kept coming up with our foreign policy discussions. So we came with a foreign policy perspective. So our observations are more, I would say, simply observations on the camps and non-camp refugees that we laid out in this report, but we've been trying to focus on how it actually impacts Turkish foreign policy and what are the give and takes between Turkey's policy choices, foreign policy choices, and the humanitarian situation on the ground. So we don't claim the kind of expertise Daryl and Professor Kirisci can offer here, and Dr. Oktay. The situation in Turkey, I mean, everybody acknowledges this. In Turkey, both the government and the civil society have shown an enormous amount of sacrifice, and they've devoted resources, they've worked hard, and civil society is just amazing. Whoever we talk to, they're working on this issue. They're giving their days and nights, and there's no word to really, you can't understate what they're doing. You can't overstate what they're doing, sorry. But there are serious challenges. It's an enormous challenge, region-wide challenge. Foreign policy, experts are all puzzled and have been largely almost paralyzed over the past several years. Nobody is able to really offer concrete, real solutions to the political question, which I agree, that's the ultimate solution to this question, but we may never get there, actually. We may simply live with this constant state of crises popping up through the region, and fallout on Turkey, Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, elsewhere. This will be a continuous situation. So I'll be more grim than Professor Kirisci's prediction. But there are many things that still can be done, and they are being done at a certain level, at the civil society level as well as the governmental level, which is why you keep having mixed bags. You have great success on certain areas. Registration, the camps, and how it's managed, and AFAD not just be active inside the camps but outside. They are able to offer expertise. They are able to, they offered us, for instance, quite, so many things that we didn't expect that we could get as researchers. Thank you for that again. But AFAD's activities remain, sort of emergency disaster response efforts, and they go beyond that. But that doesn't translate necessarily to a broader comprehensive strategy for Turkey nationally to deal with the refugee challenges, and then to balance that with the foreign policy challenges and the security ones. So you're getting certain kinds of news every other week out of Turkey, putting Turkey's foreign policy in a certain light, but 2 weeks down the road you get some sort of opposite kind of news, like the question about the Palestinian refugees. It somehow bears on Turkey's foreign policy choices, like people are doubting what is Turkey trying to do here. I think there are many things that are being done that can be done. The Turkey as a nation does need this comprehensive strategy. It's easy to say this, just okay, you have to figure out everything kind of suggestion, but it's not really like that. You have localized or to some extent nationalized areas of success, but how is that going to carry over into other areas, right? Education is important. With respect to healthcare, you have hospitals admitting refugees, whoever is registered, they can benefit from these. But when it comes to schooling, there are different kinds of challenges, and it's not as easy to allow Syrian refugees, and there's capacity questions, etc. So how are we going to bring together the areas of success and make it an overall successful strategy in the long run? And there, international community has to be involved. There's no question about it. Not just because Turkey, it's not only to support Turkey's sort of financial burden. Yes, that needs to be done, but both providing expertise, etc., at a national level, but also recognize that this is a regional issue, and it won't be solved in Turkey or in Lebanon or in Iraq locally. We are not going to be able to address this question only through a humanitarian perspective, like Professor Kirisci is saying. The states arguably are falling apart, and for some countries we can already say they're divided. We don't declare it, but maybe we won't declare it anytime soon. But that has to be combined with the humanitarian efforts and perspectives. Humanitarian strategy cannot be divorced from foreign policy perspective at this point. Whatever you touched, for instance, the Kobani example, right? You're worrying about the humanitarian issue. You're trying to take in all these people in an efficient manner, but from the foreign policy perspective, you have an entirely different picture, and you keep having that. Like when we talk to people on the ground, some of our questions sounded really weird. I guess Kilic can attest to that. They were like, what do you mean? It didn't always make sense, our foreign policy questions, because they were so focused on providing help, etc. So those things have to really come together. There are quite a few things we observed, we wrote in the report, but as I said, I want to just highlight the foreign policy aspect. This border thing has been the talk of the town for a while now. Turkish border, it's closed, it's open, it's allowing ISIS, not terrorists are coming, and all that has become the part of the foreign policy debate. But again, that really took us away from a perspective that we can develop. A lot of the civil society organizations we talked to on the ground, they definitely recognize the security problems. They wouldn't deliver to areas, for instance, where there was ISIS presence, and they would stop aid, and they would try to find ways. They describe towns like how they take aid from, they don't themselves, but their partners on the Syrian side, how they take the aid from, it's like a puzzle, and that puzzle always changes from one location to another. So you have a very complex picture on the ground. So you're not seeing, okay, here is the foreign policy decision, and this is what Turkey is doing, and everybody has to do that. There are certain things like ISIS. Nobody, is happy about it at all, obviously, and they're not, delivering aid there, etc. But they're very concerned about the humanitarian situation on the Syrian side. How are we going to provide aid, and how to make sure that ISIS doesn't dominate, or regime for that matter, somehow block this aid from reaching the needy. So we see these humanitarian efforts come into sort of conflict to some extent, or come into a different weird dynamic with the foreign policy choices of the government, also foreign policy choices of those countries and these groups, what kind of message they want to send. So when we're debating this Turkey's border and how people are able to pass, we really have to bring into picture how that humanitarian response is being managed. Turkey is insisting to keep several borders open, right? Why are they doing that? And when you talk to people, they're saying, well, it's not open and it's not closed. We have to be flexible about this. You have hundreds of people coming to the door and they want to go across because they say that things are kind of better. We want to go see if we can go back. So they have to allow that, while they have to have a system where registered people, registered refugees are not simply going back and forth without any oversight. So these are serious challenges, and it doesn't make the border policy that easy, and it doesn't. It really complicates this debate about terrorists going into Syria, etc. In terms of Turkish foreign policy, there are some interesting things we observed. We think that are important for Turkish foreign policy in terms of capacity building. I mean, this kind of challenge, the kind of response Turkey has developed, has a bearing on the country's bureaucratic structures, and the urgency of the matter basically pushes Turkey to just bypass certain things. For instance, there are Syrian schools. I'm not an legal expert, but I'm not sure what that means by Turkish law. I mean, so there are realities on the ground. You just have to do it. You can't wait for legislation to adjust it, and legislation will eventually adjust to it. And we see that the Turkish asylum law is very, forward-looking. It's very humanitarian rather than security-focused. So that pushed Turkey to pass legislation that was ahead of its many countries. So that's kind of the positive thing if you want to look at it. And then when you look at Turkey's foreign policy choices and rhetoric, etc., you see the bearing of that, the feedback coming from civil society as well as various organizations working on the ground. I think that was important at several critical junctures, like Kobani and other times. Turkey was focused, okay, how are we going to handle the incoming refugees? Whereas for the international spectator observers, it was a question of, okay, what is Turkey going to do about ISIS? So that the priorities did not necessarily overlap, and then this difference between perceptions really kind of diverged more. And I have to say, on the ground, some people, it's gonna be maybe harsh almost, but they express some sort of irrelevance for the outsiders or for the international community, because the numbers, the kind of support that they said that they were giving, like the several meals a day and the clothing and all that, and then they said, yes, this international organization did this. Yes, they would acknowledge it. Nobody did not acknowledge it, but it was almost like, okay, we are taking care of this, and they're out there doing something. They're doing research. They're doing other things. So it was almost like this irrelevance for the international community, because the challenge is so big and they have to do so many things from one day to another. So there's something wrong between international community's help and Turkey's, how that's being delivered to refugees. That might have something to do with it. The challenge is just so enormous. I think work permits are going to be critical, but that's not going to solve the problem. It has to be phased, it has to be sector-based, etc., because the perception of the general public has been quite politicized over the past several years. People are, if they don't agree with the government, they don't agree with anything that's being done on the refugees, and vice versa. If they support the government, then they support everything. I'm simplifying here, obviously, but so it is pretty much all of the issues, from education to healthcare to work permits. These are potentially and actually politicized issues, so Turkey has to be careful about that. But refugees being able to support themselves on their own through legal work permits is going to be critical. They're already working, and illegally or undocumented, but it's going to be important for this integration strategy we think that Turkey should have. Regardless, a lot of them may just simply go back, and they may want to go back, but Turkey nevertheless needs that strategy, and the international community has to be part of that. You can't extract yourself from Turkey's refugee problems and then solve the regional refugee problems. There's a lot of now developed expertise there that the international community can also benefit from. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kadir. And I don't want to make a presentation here, but just a few points of my observation. I promise it will not be a pilot presentation here for you. I think a couple of points are extremely important in terms of political solution. You will understand the significance of the political solution when you talk with the refugees, right? And they are in good camps. They are probably the best camps in the world right now. They are really happy that they are at AFAD camps. But when you talk with them, nobody is happy to be at a refugee camp, right? And everybody is trying to tell us that, well, there needs to be a political solution. Even those who looks more integrated, right? In Gaziantep, in Şanlıurfa, we met with the refugees who had families in Şanlıurfa and who are pretty much integrated to the society. And they were telling us, well, probably we will not go. But even then, they keep saying that, well, we need a psychological closure, right? The fact that on the other side of the border, we have this issue going on. And when we were actually in the camps, when we were traveling across the region, there was a case of Aleppo may fall at any moment. And there was constant concern, anxiety, right? And without that closure, without a political solution on the other side of the border, without creating a more comprehensive strategy that will keep Syria together, but make these people safe and secure, I think that people in the camps will not be happy. And even people in the camps saying that, well, this is not a sustainable situation. And they know, they have been in Turkey now more than 3-4 years. They understand the region's economy, they understand the security parameters more than I think the security experts in Washington, D.C., right? They know the region, they know the field, and when you talk with them, they keep telling that, well, we are now more than 4 or 5 million people around the world, Syrian refugees. We cannot expect the world to feed us, and we are not happy with that. And when you talk with them, they got emotional, it hurts their honor, it hurts their pride, and what they want is actually a political solution so that the people who want to go back to their countries should go back and be safe and secure. Those who stay in Syria should be safe and secure. And those who decided to now move and settle in another city or in another country would be a voluntary immigrant. And the psychological ramification of this would be much different. The second one was, this is the couple time I went to Southeast, but this was the first time that I see such an active civilian initiative in the region, right? Whichever city we go, you know, like the Urfa, Mardin, you know, like that. And when we are in Turkey, we don't expect a lot of civilian NGOs, right, civilian initiatives. And you see now that in Turkey, we say usually, you know, like the retired, you know, like the old man, Hacı amca, right? They establish now NGOs, right? Like Uşaki Vakfı, they are feeding people, one organization only, right? Feeding 2,000, providing 2,000 for 2,000 Syrian refugees twice meal, right? And this created an integrated civil service. And when we talk with these people, they keep telling us, well, we get our assistance from an organization in Trabzon or in Izmir, right? So they created this network of humanitarian assistance, you know, like the NGOs, right? This was something, you know, like the increase this actually, you know, like the, it's kind of democratization, participation. It became a more pluralistic actually region. And when we talk, they keep telling, well, we met with AFAD last week, and we told this. We met with the Turkish minister, you know, who's responsible for refugee affairs, and they are very comfortable, right? And they were telling us that a couple years ago, we wouldn't have this chance. Now we are like stakeholders, right? And we have a basically voice in this situation. We have a lot of things to say, right? Because we know the ground, we know the field. This was amazing. Another part was the civil society. We see how the camps were managed. And one thing was extremely important, I guess, was people who are responsible. Yes, there are the camp chiefs, but there were people who are responsible, Syrians who are responsible for that. So one of the camps, for example, in Midyat, right? It was kind of, you know, like the 5-6 divisions, and each division has its own Syrian chief who will be directly reporting to the, you know, like the managers of the camp. And we had a conversation with several of them, and they were elected actually, officials, right? And they run the things. It is kind of, you know, like the forming of civil society. They were talking about having possibility in the future to have a radio station, you know, like what they think is now, you know, like a much more forward-looking than anyone. And one more thing about Kobani. A couple days after the Kobani crisis erupted, actually, I went to Kobani, right? Not Kobani, of course, the Suruç, right? The border to Kobani. And I went actually all the way to Mürşitpınar. A few days after that, actually, they closed the Mürşitpınar gate. And I went to Mürşitpınar, and AFAD actually had a camp just across the Mürşitpınar and border, and it was closed, I guess, because there was some shelling from the Syrian side, and it moved. And I see, you know, like because I just want to add a few things to what Dr. Oktay said about Kobani. In a few days' time, it was a very rapid response. There was a temporary camp, you know, like I think, outside of Suruç. And now, you know, like after 2-3 months, I went back to Mürşitpınar, right? Now I see a huge camp, I think 30,000, 35,000, a huge camp, you know, like was established outside of Suruç, you know, like there are some other camps, you know, like around Urfa. So this is, you know, like if you were in Mürşitpınar or if you were in Suruç, you know, like when the crisis was erupting, at that time I didn't have, you know, like internet access. I didn't see what it was written on Turkey's, you know, like the contribution to, you know, like the humanitarian assistance actually in Kobani crisis. But when you see actually the situation, when you talk with the people, right, it is in a few days, I think 4 or 5 days, 195,000 people to kind of provide shelter, you know, like the regular daily meals and hot meals for these people. was an immense challenge. And I guess the AFAD did a tremendous job actually in Kobani. I didn't see the the actual response to the crisis. The only place I see the actual response to the crisis was Kobani, because people were moving. I didn't have a chance to meet Dr. Oktay over there, but they were working day and night. The mayor was working. It was civil society was working at the same time. I went to Diyarbakir from Kobani, and in Diyarbakir, Kurdish NGOs, right? The different NGOs in Diyarbakir, they were actually trying to help. They were trying to coordinate their activities. They were trying to communicate with AFAD. I guess this is kind of, in the long run, yes, this is an immense challenge. But when you look at the region and when you look at the civilian initiative and its coordination with organizations like AFAD, its relation with state, it's kind of, in the long run, it's something that transformed the region as well. So this is my pilot presentation for 2-3 minutes.
Very good.
And now I will open the floor for questions. If you have any, yes.
Hi, I'm Juliette Olay from TÜSIAD in Harrisburg. I have a question. All of you have touched a little bit about this, but there is a little bit of a debate among experts in Turkey regarding the kind of welcoming attitudes of the Turkish public. On the one side, you have some observers who are really kind of amazed by the resilience of the Turkish population and society, both in the border areas and in other parts of the countries, and the welcoming attitudes towards a huge amount of refugees that came in. But on the other side, you also have some voices that become alarmed at some of the kind of new discourses that you see being heard, more exclusive discourses regarding refugees, and some of them are talking about maybe an upcoming backlash regarding kind of more negative reactions to refugees. So I wanted to have a sense of, given your observations in the fields, where this is going, whether, which one is the stronger pictures. Of course, we probably have a little bit of both of them, but which direction are we probably going with that particular issue? Thank you.
You want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. When we first started going to Turkey as Refugees International, this is something we looked at all the time, because in Lebanon and Jordan in particular, tensions became very high very quickly. It was only probably in this last trip to Turkey that we started to hear from the host community that things were getting a little bit tense. Even with that said, most of it was pretty well under control. But the direction it seems to be going in is toward more tension. There had just been a rapid needs assessment done in Gaziantep, and one of the things they asked was what relationships were like with host communities, and very, very few people said they had bad relationships. At worst, they said things are just sort of neutral here. So I think both Turkey and its policies and the Turkish people are to be commended for that, and they have been quite welcoming. You're probably aware that when the Syrians first started coming in, it was very much Turkish host families and communities that were taking people in. So things are still, I think, relatively calm. There are incidents here and there for sure, but it appears to be moving in a direction of more attention if some of these social issues are not sorted out.
Anyone else who wants to add?
I mentioned that things are, because of also the upcoming elections, things keep getting politicized. But we used to hear more, like a couple years back, I think we wrote it in the report, refugees are going to be given citizenship and they'll be able to vote. Like this word of mouth stuff, or all of a sudden it would become something big. We don't quite, I don't know you, but I don't quite hear those things as much anymore. And it kind of depended on the city as well. Like Urfa was hosting the most number of refugees, but its economy is much more agriculture, and it's a bit more, less hierarchical economically, I would say. Gaziantep is much more of an industrial city, etc. So some of the complaints you could hear more pronounced in Gaziantep because it's an industrial city, but at the same time they are the ones who actually need extra workers. Urfa cannot quite have if they were given work permits, people in Urfa told us they should be relocated to cities where workforce is needed, such as Gaziantep, that is an industrial city. But ironically, in Gaziantep, you have the business people saying that we need workers, government should give them work permits so we can employ them comfortably. But at the same time, you could hear others saying, oh, they're all in the streets, they're begging, things like that. But I think one critical juncture was Kobani, if you wanted to, you know, it was a crisis of, you know, ethnic Kurds wanting to go cross the border, and then all these refugees coming in, and it was a difficult effort. That really pushed the tensions up in Turkey, especially in the region, but throughout Turkey. So these kinds of things can happen, and I connect that back to new waves of refugees. And Turkey seems quite conscious of that, both civil society and government, which is why they want to manage it on the other side of the border before it becomes a problem inside Turkey, which is a risky proposition to run camps on the other side of the border, right? So I think overall we've seen everybody making a conscious effort about, like, the work permits. Not everybody was comfortable talking about it, because, you know, it could create a perception that, oh, Syrians are being given a free pass. It's a bit like immigration debate in America. Not the same thing, but obviously. So those things can create tensions, but I feel that this was the case much more earlier in the conflict. Now it's less, I would say.
Any other questions? Yeah, we have one more.
Ken Meyerberg, World Docs. Has the Syrian government set up camps for their internally displaced, and do they receive any international assistance to support them?
Sorry. The camps for IDPs that you will see inside Syria are not government administered or government set up. They tended to arise more spontaneously based on where large numbers of people were congregating. For example, even in a village, you might have a lot of people who moved into a bigger city and took up residence in a mosque or in a school building. So they're not sort of camps the way we're thinking of camps when we look at Turkey, for example. There is certainly international aid going toward them in the sense that there are NGOs and INGOs working there doing services. Whether or not there's actually sort of cash being designated for specific sites is a little different. It's not working that way because it's quite hard to get some money into Syria and aid into Syria right now as well. So it's much more of the general response is being funded, and people are doing what they can with those funds.
You want to add a few things, or if you want to say, if Dr. Oktay wants to say you have a few minutes if you want to.
Just maybe a
response
couple
to the
of
panel.
comments on
Yeah.
regarding like one issue again that you have mentioned about involvement of the civil society and especially NGOs in Turkey into the management of this issue, and also through this getting them involved more with the state issues. This is true. Maybe this is one of the advantages, one of the improvements that we have had in Turkey. There's a tremendous amount of increase in the civil society activities in Turkey. And so they do have a lot more voice right now in the government and in the state issues, and also managing of the refugee issues than ever before. Regarding the border issue that Professor Ustun has mentioned, it is a challenge for us as well. It's a huge challenge. Like, can you imagine like having a pressure from the entire world, like whether Turkey has an open border policy or not, whether we have closed any of our borders. You are having a pressure on that part, and at the same time, not having a very strict rules and policies on the security side of the border. This is a huge challenge indeed. Security is our number one issue at this point indeed, because there are many terrorist activities going on at the other side of the border, including the state terrorism as well. and ISIS and all those things, and nobody knows who is who. It's a kind of like no man's land over there. So Turkey has to be very careful, extremely careful, in keeping its own security and concerning about her own citizens' securities as well, but at the same time trying to provide humanitarian assistance to those who are suffering in the Syrian side and also those who are running away from a kind of like death. So letting them get involved with the humanitarian assistance. So we did have the same challenge at Kobani as well, indeed. So what we are trying to do is trying to develop some kind of balance over there. Yes, we do have, like from time to time, we close one maybe border gate and open another one. So main reason for it is the security issue. So we are a lot more strict right now than again ever before because the situation in the area is extremely fragile. Foreign policy and humanitarian issue, my area is not foreign policy, I'm not going to comment on that one, but I did make my own note regarding there was an issue indeed, especially with Professor Kirisci over there, like yes, there are cooperation and collaboration, but why not at the level that it is expected? I'll personally look into it, maybe again through SETA or any other organizations who might be interested over here to see the reasons or factors that might have impact on how come the perceptions, there is a kind of like perception difference both sides. What is it that really prevents international organizations getting involved more with the refugee issues or with helping more in Turkey indeed? We will be as AFAD definitely open to any issue or there. So basically that was a comment for Daryl's part as well regarding the border restrictions. Again, I'd like to thank especially to SETA as well. It was a great panel with Professor Ustun and Kanat. It was a very good report, and we do expect more on this part indeed, and whatever it is we can do, we'll be more than happy to participate or contribute. Thank you.
Thank you again. Thank you for Dr. Oktay, actually, first coming from all the way from Ankara in such a busy time actually for him. He's just here for 2 days, so he spent almost a day with us. Thank you for him. Thank you for Daryl, Dr. Kirisci and Dr. Ustun for the panel. And thank you for all for coming today and staying here for, I think it's almost 2 hours now in the whole panel. It was a great turnout. Thanks a lot. Thank you.